At 8:34 on Monday morning, the fourth assistant was dragged out of Alessandro Romano's office. His tie was torn, his phone was smashed, and two security guards were carrying him by the arms while he shouted that he had only taken one picture. Nobody on the 43rd floor tried to help him. By 8:36, the elevator doors opened again, and Emily Carter stepped out in a faded lavender cardigan, crooked glasses, and one scuffed black heel. Gerald Pierce, the head of human resources, stared at her as if the temp agency had sent him a practical joke. "You're the replacement?" Emily tightened her grip on her resume. "That's what they told me." Gerald looked past her, apparently hoping someone more impressive would appear. No one did. A nervous laugh escaped him. "Do you understand who you're here to work for?" "Yes." Emily glanced toward the dark wooden doors at the end of the corridor. "Alessandro Romano. That name should frighten you." "It does." "Good. Then you may have enough sense to leave." Emily did not move. Behind Gerald, employees pretended not to watch. Men in tailored suits slowed beside the glass conference rooms. Two executive assistants whispered near the copy station. Someone quietly started a timer on his phone. Gerald lowered his voice. "Four people have been fired this morning. One spilled coffee. One changed his filing system. One lied about a phone call. The last one photographed Mr. Romano's private office. I don't know what the agency told you, but this is not a normal job. I need the job." Gerald's eyes moved over her cheap cardigan, round figure, messy ponytail, and trembling hands. His disappointment sharpened into cruelty. "You won't last 10 minutes. Emily looked at the folder tucked beneath his arm. "Maybe," she said. "But before you send me away, you should tell Mr. Romano that his 3 o'clock meeting is an ambush." The corridor went silent. Gerald's smile disappeared. "What did you say?" "The maintenance request clipped to your folder." She pointed. "It says the bullet-resistant glass in conference room A will be taken offline at 2:45. The work order was approved by someone named Mark Delaney, but Mark works in accounting, not facilities. The visitor list for the 3 o'clock meeting includes 6 men from Victor Moretti's company. Yet the catering request is for 12. Either Moretti has developed a sudden appetite, or 6 men are entering the building without being logged." Gerald stared down at the papers. Emily continued, "Because stopping now would only make her look uncertain. And the access code on the maintenance form is expired. Whoever submitted it copied an old request. It's a setup." One of the security guards outside Alessandro's office turned toward her. Gerald's face lost color. "You read private documents? You held them facing outward in the elevator lobby. You had no right." The office door opened. Alessandro Romano stood in the doorway. He was taller than Emily expected, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit so precisely cut it looked like armor. His dark hair was swept back from a hard, controlled face. A pale scar crossed the edge of his jaw, nearly hidden unless the light struck it. His eyes were cold gray. Everyone on the floor seemed to stop breathing. Alessandro looked at Gerald first. "Why is my hallway full of spectators?" Then he looked at Emily. His gaze took in the cardigan, the crooked glasses, the scuffed heel, and the resume pressed against her chest. "I asked for an assistant," he said. "Not a charity case." Emily had been insulted by employers, classmates, strangers, and relatives. She had been called too quiet, too awkward, too heavy, too ordinary. Usually she swallowed the words and carried them home. Today she was too desperate to be embarrassed. "I'm not asking for charity," she said. "I'm telling you someone altered the security arrangements for your 3 o'clock meeting." The temperature in the corridor seemed to drop. Alessandro stepped closer. "Who sent you?" "The temp agency." "That was not my question." "Nobody sent me to spy on you." Emily nodded toward Gerald's folder. "The paperwork is wrong. If you check the original maintenance schedule, you'll see the glass inspection was completed last month. Someone reopened the order this morning." Gerald tried to interrupt. "Mr. Romano, she's been here less than 2 minutes. She doesn't know what she's talking about." Alessandro did not take his eyes off Emily. And what else have you decided, you know? She hesitated. His expression hardened. Speak. Emily forced herself to meet his eyes. Your accountant is stealing from you. A few people in the corridor visibly flinched. His name is Mark Delaney, she continued. The same man who approved the maintenance request. He's been moving small payments through a shell company called Viridian Holdings. The amounts are low enough to look like consulting fees, but they repeat every second Thursday, and always clear one day before your internal audits. Alessandro's face did not change, but something dangerous entered his eyes. You saw all that on Gerald's folder? No. The quarterly ledger is open on the desk behind you. He glanced over his shoulder. From the corridor, Emily could see only part of the first page. But the numbers had caught her attention the instant the office door opened. Numbers always did. Alessandro stepped aside. Come in. Gerald blinked. Mr. Romano. You too. Emily entered the office. It was larger than her entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked down over Manhattan. The furniture was black leather and dark walnut. A wall of security monitors showed the lobby, elevators, loading dock and underground garage. The desk, however, was chaos. Contracts overlapped financial reports. Handwritten notes were stuck to folders without dates. 2 phones rang at once. A half-finished espresso sat beside an unsigned agreement worth more money than Emily would earn in a lifetime. Alessandro closed the door. Show me. Emily placed her resume aside and walked to the ledger. Her hands still trembled, but the numbers steadied her. She traced 6 payments with one finger. Viridian Holdings. 9,800. 11,200. 8,600. Different descriptions, same routing sequence. The invoices were generated from the same template, but the tax identification number changes by 1 digit on 2 of them. That usually means someone copied a legitimate vendor and altered the account destination. Gerald frowned. That could be a clerical error. 6 clerical errors, all benefiting the same account? Emily asked. That's not clumsiness. That's a system. Alessandro picked up his phone. Bring Mark Delaney to my office. Now. He ended the call and turned back to Emily. If you're wrong, you will regret walking into this building. I'm not wrong. You sound very certain for someone whose hands are shaking. My hands shake when I'm nervous, she said. My brain still works. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not warmth. Not amusement. Interest. Mark Delaney arrived 7 minutes later wearing an expensive navy suit and an offended smile. What is this about? He asked. Alessandro slid the ledger across the desk. Viridian Holdings. Mark's eyes flickered. It lasted less than a second. Emily saw it. So did Alessandro. I don't handle individual vendor accounts, Mark said quickly. You'd need to speak with accounts payable. Emily looked at the silver pen in his breast pocket. Then why is the approval code on every invoice the same as the code printed on your pen? Mark froze. The pen was promotional merchandise from a private banking conference. Tiny numbers ran beneath the logo. The last 6 digits matched the authorization code in the ledger. Alessandro's voice became very quiet. Empty your pockets. Mark tried to laugh. This is ridiculous. One of the guards moved behind him. Within 15 minutes, security found 2 phones, an offshore banking token, and a second access badge registered to a non-existent facilities contractor. Under pressure, Mark admitted the theft. Then he admitted selling building access to Victor Moretti's people. The 3 o'clock meeting really was an ambush. Gerald sank into a chair. Alessandro remained standing behind his desk, one hand resting flat on the wood. His control was more frightening than shouting would have been. How long? He asked Mark. 6 months. How much? Just under 400,000. And the meeting? Mark's mouth trembled. Moretti promised I'd be protected. Alessandro gave a small nod to his guards. They took Mark away. Emily did not ask where. When the door closed, Alessandro turned toward her. Everyone expected him to thank her. Instead, he said, "Your 10 minutes are up." Emily's stomach dropped. Gerald rose too quickly. "I'll escort her out." "No." Alessandro looked at the mess covering his desk. "She stays until the end of the day." Gerald stared. "As your assistant?" "As a test." Emily released a breath she had not realized she was holding. Alessandro pointed to the papers. "Fix this." "All of it." "You claimed your brain works." "It does." "Then prove it." For the next 3 hours, Emily did not look up. She sorted every document by urgency, then by business unit. She separated legitimate contracts from private operational reports. She found 2 unsigned agreements that would expire at noon, 3 double-booked meetings, a canceled flight still listed on his calendar, and a medical appointment someone had erased without rescheduling. She created a call sheet ranking contacts by access level. She flagged numbers that appeared under different names. She moved the espresso before it could spill on a merger agreement and quietly replaced it with black coffee after noticing he had not touched anything sweet. At 12:20, Alessandro returned from a security meeting and stopped beside the desk. The chaos was gone. A red folder contained decisions that required him immediately. Blue folders held legal matters. Black folders held information too sensitive to leave unattended. His afternoon schedule had been rebuilt around the cancelled Moretti meeting, and every change included a reason. He picked up the red folder. "Who told you to organize it this way?" "No one." "Why black for restricted files?" "Because everyone in this building already associates black with you. They'll remember." He opened the schedule. "You canceled lunch with Senator Klein." "He canceled on Friday. Your previous assistant never removed it." "You moved my call with Chicago. Their attorney is in court until 2. You would have spent 20 minutes waiting." "You rescheduled my doctor. The appointment was overdue by 9 months." Alessandro slowly raised his eyes. Emily braced herself. "Do you always interfere this much?" he asked. "Only when people leave me a mess." Gerald made a choking sound near the door. Alessandro studied her for a long moment. Then he sat down, opened the red folder and said, "1 week." Emily blinked. "Excuse me. You have 1 week to prove this morning wasn't luck. You make one serious mistake, you're gone. You lie to me once, you're gone. You touch my private phone, enter a locked drawer, or repeat anything you hear in this office, you will wish being fired was your biggest problem." Emily nodded. "Understood." His gaze dropped to her resume. "For jobs in 3 years," he said. "Why?" "Because I noticed things people wanted hidden." "That sounds convenient." "It wasn't." "What did you notice?" "At my last firm, a partner was billing dead clients. At the company before that, a supervisor changed payroll records to steal overtime from temporary staff. At the one before that, the owner's son was using company credit cards to pay gambling debts." "And every company fired you instead of them?" "The partner owned the firm. The supervisor was married to the regional director. The owner's son was the owner's son." A humorless smile touched Alessandro's mouth. "You have a talent for making enemies." "No," Emily said. "I have a talent for finding them." By 5 o'clock, the entire floor knew the impossible had happened. The woman in the cheap cardigan was still there. By 7, the office was running more smoothly than it had in years. At 9, Emily was still working. Alessandro came out of a private meeting and found her at the side desk, correcting inconsistencies in a shipping report. "Why are you still here?" "You have a conference call at 9:30. "I know my schedule." "Then you also know the caller moved it to tomorrow." He glanced at his phone. A message waited on the screen. Emily held out his coat. "Your driver is downstairs." "What about you?" "I'll take the subway." "At this hour?" "I live in Brooklyn, not a war zone." "In my experience, the difference is negotiable." She almost smiled. He took the coat but did not leave. "You were afraid this morning," he said. "Yes." "You're still afraid." "Yes." "Then why didn't you run?" Emily looked at the organized desk, the secured files, and the schedule that no longer resembled a battlefield. Because fear doesn't pay my rent. A quiet laugh escaped him before he could stop it. It was the first human sound she had heard him make. Go home, Miss Carter. Am I expected back tomorrow? Alessandro opened the office door. 7:30. Emily gathered her bag. As she passed him, he added, and replace those shoes. The left heel is splitting. She looked down, embarrassed. I noticed, he said. For once, Emily was the one being observed. Emily's 1-week trial became the most exhausting 7 days of her life. She arrived before sunrise and left after dark. She learned which calls Alessandro accepted immediately, which names made his jaw tighten, and which meetings required security to sweep the room twice. She learned that he drank coffee black, hated unnecessary explanations, and never sat with his back to a door. More importantly, she learned the difference between his legitimate empire and the organization hidden beneath it. Romano Holdings owned hotels, construction firms, warehouses, restaurants, and a private security company. Those businesses employed thousands of people and generated more than enough money to make Alessandro one of New York's most powerful men. But power had another architecture. It moved through coded calls, favors, debts, sealed envelopes, and men who lowered their voices when Emily entered a room. She did not pretend the world was clean. She simply made sure the paperwork was. On Tuesday, she caught a supplier charging for steel that had never arrived. On Wednesday, she prevented Alessandro from signing a contract that transferred liability for a hazardous construction site to one of his companies. On Thursday, she discovered that someone had copied the executive elevator key and used it after midnight. On Friday morning, Alessandro placed a permanent employment contract on her desk. Emily read the salary twice. This has an extra zero. No, it doesn't. She looked up. This is more than the department manager at my last company made. Your last company was run by idiots. That doesn't mean I'm worth this. Alessandro leaned against the edge of her desk. In 5 days you recovered more money than I will pay you in 5 years. Sign it. Emily hesitated. Is there a problem? No. Then why are you staring at the page? Because nobody had ever offered her security before. Because every job she had held came with temporary badges, vague promises, and polite rejection emails. Because part of her expected someone to laugh and snatch the contract away. She signed. Alessandro took the pen from her. You're still on probation. You just gave me a permanent contract. I can permanently fire you. That's reassuring. He almost smiled. The smile vanished when his private line rang. Emily watched him answer. He said nothing for nearly a minute. Then his expression changed. Where? He asked. He listened, ended the call, and reached for his jacket. What happened? Emily asked. Nothing you need to worry about. That usually means I should worry. He gave her a warning look. She opened his schedule. You have a meeting with Victor Moretti in 40 minutes. It's been moved. To where? Emily. The original location was secure. If Moretti moved it at the last minute, he controls the room, the entrances, and the staff. After what happened Monday, that matters. Alessandro buttoned his jacket. My men will handle it. Your men approved the conference room that Mark compromised. The words landed harder than she intended. His eyes went cold. Be careful. Emily swallowed, but did not look away. I am being careful. Someone inside your organization gave Moretti access once. Until you know who, changing locations is exactly what he wants. Alessandro stood motionless. Then he took out his phone and called security. The meeting was canceled. 20 minutes later, surveillance footage showed 2 armed men entering the alternate location through a service corridor. Alessandro watched the recording without speaking. When it ended, he turned toward Emily. You were right again. I'd prefer to be wrong occasionally. So would I. The first attempt on her life came 4 days later. At least Alessandro called it an attempt. Emily called it a brick through her apartment window. She came home shortly after midnight and found glass across her living room floor. The brick lay beside her couch, wrapped in a sheet of paper. Stop looking. Her laptop was gone. Her notebooks had been ripped apart. Drawers were emptied, cushions slashed, and every folder she kept from work had been scattered across the kitchen. Nothing else had been stolen. Emily sat down among the broken glass and stared at the message. She had spent her entire life being dismissed. She understood ridicule. She understood rejection. Threats were new. For 10 full minutes she let herself shake. Then she called the police. She did not call Alessandro. He found out anyway. The next morning, Emily arrived at work wearing the same cardigan as the day before because most of her clothes had been thrown onto the dirty floor. A shallow cut crossed her palm where she had picked up broken glass. Alessandro noticed before she reached her desk. "What happened to your hand?" "Nothing." He looked at her coat. "You wore that yesterday." "I own more than one white blouse. The second button is missing from both?" Emily stopped. His voice lowered. "What happened?" "My apartment was broken into." The corridor around them seemed to empty without anyone being told. Alessandro's face became unreadable. "When?" "Last night." "Why didn't you call me?" "Because you're my employer, not emergency services." "Was anything taken?" "My laptop. They destroyed my notes." "What notes?" "Work patterns. Schedule changes. Names I didn't recognize. Security inconsistencies." His eyes sharpened. "You kept copies at home?" "Nothing classified. Just observations." "Observations nearly got you killed." "It was a brick. It was a warning." "I know." Alessandro stepped closer. His anger was so controlled that Emily felt it more strongly than if he had shouted. "You are moving." "I can't afford to move." "You're moving into my building." "No." His eyebrows lifted, as if the word had not been used on him in years. Emily crossed her arms. "I will not move into your penthouse. I didn't ask you to share my bedroom." Good, because the answer would still be no. For one suspended second, his security team stared at the floor. Then Alessandro said, "There is an empty apartment 6 floors below mine. Separate entrance, separate key, full security. You will stay there until I know who targeted you. I pay rent." "It's not for rent." "Then deduct something from my salary." "Fine." "How much?" $1 a month. "That is not reasonable." "Neither is arguing with me while someone is searching your home for information." Emily opened her mouth. He cut her off. "This is not about control. You were threatened because you work for me. That makes your safety my responsibility." There was no arrogance in his voice now, only guilt. Emily slowly lowered her arms. "Separate apartment," she said. "Yes." "Separate key." "Yes." "And you knock." Alessandro's mouth curved slightly. "I know how doors work." She moved that night. The apartment was larger and more luxurious than any place Emily had ever entered without cleaning it afterward. It had 2 bedrooms, a view of the East River, polished wood floors, and a kitchen stocked with food she had not requested. A pair of new black shoes waited beside the closet. Emily found Alessandro in the hallway before he could escape. "You bought me shoes." "I replaced defective equipment. They're my exact size." "Security checked." "That is disturbing." "It is efficient." She looked at the shoes, then back at him. "Thank you." He gave one short nod and walked toward the elevator. "Alessandro." It was the first time she had used his first name. He stopped. "Thank you for taking the threat seriously." His expression softened for only a moment. "I take anything involving you seriously." The elevator doors closed before she could answer. The following week, Emily discovered that the break-in and the altered Moretti meeting were connected. The clue was not dramatic. It was a meal receipt. A member of Alessandro's security team had billed dinner at a restaurant in Queens on the same night. He claimed to be guarding a warehouse in New Jersey. The restaurant was owned by one of Moretti's cousins. Emily compared shift logs, fuel receipts, and elevator records. One inconsistency became 4, then 11. The traitor was not the guard who submitted the receipt. He was careless, not strategic. Someone else had changed his assignment after the fact. That person was Marco Bellini, Alessandro's right-hand man. Marco had been with the Romano family for 15 years. He had protected Alessandro after his father's murder, pulled him from a burning car, and taken a bullet meant for him. In every photograph from Alessandro's rise to power, Marco stood a step behind him. Emily checked the evidence 3 times before she spoke. Alessandro was alone in his office when she entered carrying a black folder. "Close the door," she said. He looked up sharply. "What happened? I need you to read this before you react. That sentence never leads anywhere pleasant." She placed the folder on his desk. Inside were altered security rosters, coded payments, burner phone records, and photographs of Marco meeting with 2 men tied to Moretti. Alessandro read the first page, then the second. His face went still. "No. I'm sorry." "No," he shoved the folder back toward her. "The records are wrong. They aren't. Marco was with me before I had this building. Before I had money. Before anyone thought I would survive. I know. He saved my life." He may have meant it then. Alessandro stood so quickly his chair struck the wall. "You think loyalty expires? I think people change. I think debts turn into resentment. I think someone can love you for 15 years and still decide they deserve more than you gave them. You don't know him." "No. But I know the records." His eyes flashed. "Get out." Emily's chest tightened. "Alessandro, get out of my office." She left without another word. For the first time since hiring her, he ignored her warning. That night, Marco disabled 2 cameras in the underground garage and opened the west gate for Moretti's remaining men. Emily saw the outage from her apartment security panel. She called Alessandro. No answer. She called the head of the night team. No answer. Then she called the one guard whose schedule Marco had falsified and told him to lock down the garage immediately. By the time Alessandro's car reached the lower level, the gate had closed. Gunmen were trapped between the outer barrier and a steel fire door. Romano security surrounded them before they could reach him. Marco tried to flee through the service stairs. He did not make it out of the building. At 2:15 in the morning, Alessandro knocked on Emily's door. She opened it in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, her hair loose around her shoulders. For once he did not look powerful. His jacket was gone. Blood darkened one cuff of his white shirt. His face was pale with exhaustion. "You were right," he said. Emily stepped aside. He entered and stood in the middle of her living room as if he had forgotten what came next. "Is Marco alive?" she asked. "No." She did not ask who killed him. Alessandro looked toward the windows. "He said I owed him half of everything. He said he spent 15 years standing behind me while I took the power." Emily remained quiet. "He knew about my brother," Alessandro continued. "He knew what betrayal did to my family. He knew, and he did it anyway." His voice cracked on the last word. Emily moved closer, slowly enough to give him time to step away. "He did not. I should have trusted you," he said. "You trusted 15 years of history. I nearly got you killed because I didn't want to see the truth. But you see it now." He looked at her. The cold, controlled mask was gone. "How do you live like this?" he asked. "Seeing every lie before everyone else? I don't always see it before. You saw Moretti, Marco. And I still applied to 4 companies that fired me. I still trusted people who blamed me for their crimes. Seeing a pattern doesn't make it hurt less." Alessandro lowered his head. Emily touched his hand. His fingers closed around hers with surprising care. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "Do what?" "Need someone." Emily's throat tightened. "You could start by not ordering them out of the room." A rough laugh escaped him. Then he pulled her into his arms. Emily held him while the most feared man in New York stood shaking in her quiet apartment. After Marco's betrayal, the balance between them changed. Alessandro no longer treated Emily like a temporary employee who might disappear with the next elevator. He included her in meetings no assistant had ever attended. He asked for her judgment before signing deals. When she disagreed with him, he listened even when listening made him angry. The rest of the organization noticed. Some respected her because she had saved Alessandro twice. Others resented her because she had earned in 2 months what they had failed to earn in 20 years. His trust. Gerald resented her most of all. He had worked for Romano Holdings for 11 years. He knew every executive's weakness, every employee's salary, and every secret buried in a personnel file. He had imagined that Patience would eventually place him beside Alessandro. Instead, a woman he had laughed at in the hallway now entered the boss's office without knocking. He began collecting anything that could be used against her. Emily's old terminations were easy to find. So was the theft accusation from her first accounting job. The accusation had been dismissed, but Gerald removed the page showing that detail. He obtained photographs of Emily entering Alessandro's building at night and conveniently omitted the fact that she lived in a separate apartment. He copied bank records showing her new salary and presented the increase as a secret payment. Then he carried the file to the advisory council. The council consisted of 5 older men whose families had supported the Romanos for generations. They tolerated Alessandro's legitimate businesses because those businesses protected the old organization. They tolerated Emily because Alessandro demanded it. But they did not trust outsiders, and Emily represented everything they feared. Intelligence without family loyalty, influence without permission, and a woman who could see how their money moved. She is not protecting him, Gerald told them. She is studying him. One councilman tapped the photograph of Emily entering the building. And sharing his bed? Gerald lowered his eyes with carefully performed discomfort. I believe so. Does she have access to the private accounts? All of them. The security system? Yes. The council records? Not yet. Gerald paused. But it is only a matter of time. The oldest councilman, Vincent DeLuca, closed the file. Then we remove her before she becomes impossible to remove. Emily knew none of this. For the first time in years she was happy. Her days were still brutal, but they had purpose. She was no longer asked to shrink herself so other people could feel competent. Alessandro expected her to be sharp. He relied on it. At night, he sometimes came down to her apartment for dinner. The first time he arrived with a bottle of wine that cost more than her monthly rent in Brooklyn. Emily held up the pot on her stove. I made boxed pasta. I've eaten worse. I find that hard to believe. My father once made me eat dinner with a senator from New Jersey. She laughed so suddenly she nearly dropped the spoon. Alessandro stared at her. What? She asked. You don't laugh enough. Most people aren't funny enough. I'm not funny. That's what made it funny. He began laughing too. Surprised both of them. Later, after the dishes were cleared, they stood by the windows overlooking the river. The city lights reflected in the glass, surrounding them with 2 versions of Manhattan, one real, one ghosted. Alessandro looked at her reflection. Why did you stay? He asked. At the job. After the break-in. After Moretti. After Marco. Emily considered the question. Because leaving every time someone wants me gone teaches them that intimidation works. That is a dangerous principle. So is ruling a criminal empire. His gaze shifted to her. You disapprove. I'm not stupid enough to pretend I don't know what you are. And yet you're here. I'm here because I also know what you could be. Alessandro became very still. Nobody spoke to him about possibility. They spoke about loyalty, fear, profit, and survival. Emily spoke as if he had a future beyond all of them. What do you think I could be? A man who doesn't need everyone around him to be afraid. He stepped closer. And what are you afraid of? Emily's pulse quickened. Right now. Yes. That you're going to kiss me. His eyes dropped to her mouth. Does that frighten you? Yes. Do you want me to stop? She shook her head. He kissed her gently, as if force belonged to every part of his life except this one. When they separated, Emily whispered, "This is a terrible idea." "Probably. You're my boss. I can promote you." "That does not solve the ethical problem. It solves the salary problem." She laughed against his shoulder. Their relationship remained private, not because Emily was ashamed, but because privacy was the only thing Alessandro's world did not immediately turn into leverage. At work, she remained Miss Carter. At night, he became the man who stole blankets, hated old movies, and woke from nightmares about a brother who had died before Alessandro learned how to grieve. Emily never asked him to become harmless. She asked him to become honest. Slowly, he did. He shifted money away from operations that depended on violence. He expanded the legitimate companies. He dismissed men who treated cruelty as entertainment. He created education funds for employees' children and medical coverage for families who had spent generations serving the organization. "You're making me respectable," he complained one evening. "No," Emily said. "I'm making you harder to prosecute." He kissed her forehead. "That's my girl." The phrase should have annoyed her. Instead, it felt like belonging. That was why Gerald's trap worked. He did not accuse Emily of one dramatic betrayal. He built a story out of small truths stripped of context. Her notes at home became proof that she had profiled the organization. Her salary became proof that she had manipulated Alessandro. Her previous terminations became proof that every employer eventually discovered her dishonesty. A transfer Alessandro had authorized for a protected witness fund was altered to look as if Emily had moved $2 million into an account she controlled. Then Vincent DeLuca called an emergency council meeting. Emily was not invited. Alessandro entered the private dining room expecting a dispute over business expansion. Instead, 5 councilmen sat around the table with Gerald at the far end and a thick file placed before Alessandro's chair. Vincent spoke first. "You have allowed an outsider into every protected part of this organization." Alessandro did not sit. "Choose your next words carefully. We tried to protect your dignity by remaining silent about the affair." Gerald looked down. Alessandro's eyes moved to him. "You have 10 seconds to explain why you are in this room." "To save you," Gerald said. Alessandro nearly laughed. Then Vincent opened the file. The forged transfer was on top. The account carried Emily's name. Alessandro read the routing numbers twice. "This is false." "Then call the bank," Vincent said. He did. The account existed. $2 million had arrived 3 days earlier. Alessandro felt the old wound inside him open. Marco had looked him in the eyes and called him brother while selling his movements to Moretti. His father's closest advisor had arranged the shooting that killed Alessandro's older brother. Every person he had ever trusted had eventually found a price. Except Emily. He had believed Emily was different. Vincent slid another page across the table. It showed emails between Emily and a federal contact. They were fabricated but expertly. The language sounded like her. The dates matched nights she had worked late. Gerald added quietly, "She asked for access to sealed personnel files yesterday." Alessandro looked up. "Why?" "She said she was auditing security clearances." That part was true. Emily had requested the files because 3 access logs did not match current employee records. Vincent leaned back. "How many betrayals will it take before you admit affection has made you blind?" Alessandro closed the file. "I will speak to her." "Alone?" "Yes. That is exactly what she expects." Alessandro stared at Vincent until the older man fell silent. Then he carried the file upstairs. Emily was in her apartment barefoot, reviewing a contract at the kitchen counter when he arrived. He did not knock. The door opened hard enough to strike the wall. Emily turned startled. One look at his face erased her smile. "What happened?" Alessandro threw the file onto the counter. "Tell me you didn't do this." She opened it. First she looked confused. Then she saw the bank transfer. "This isn't mine. The account is in your name." "I have never seen it. The bank confirmed your identification was used to open it. Then someone stole my identity." He pointed to the emails. "And these?" Fake. The personnel files? I requested them because old badges are still active. The notes you kept at home? You knew about those. I knew what you told me. Silence fell between them. Emily slowly closed the file. Do you believe I stole from you? Alessandro wanted to say no. He wanted certainty to rise above every old memory. Instead, he heard himself ask, why is the account in your name? Emily's face changed. The hurt was immediate, but underneath it came something colder. You tell me. You have an army of investigators. Answer me. I did. Did you approach me because someone sent you? Her lips parted. He knew he had gone too far before the question finished leaving his mouth. But fear had momentum. Was the first day planned? He demanded. Mark Moretti, the security breach. Did you already know because you were part of it? Emily stared at him as if he were a stranger. I saved your life. I know. I stood beside you when Marco betrayed you. I know. I gave you every piece of myself that I spent years protecting. His voice dropped. Then help me understand. No. The word was quiet. Alessandro blinked. No. I will not beg you to believe the person you claim to love. Emily. You know how I work. You know how I think. You know I document everything because nobody believed me when I told the truth. And the moment someone places a polished lie in front of you, you turn me into every person who betrayed you. I'm trying to protect the organization. Then protect it. Her eyes filled, but her voice remained steady. Just don't pretend you're protecting us. He reached for her. She stepped back. That hurt more than any accusation. You once told me you didn't know how to need someone, she said. Now I understand. You only need people until needing them becomes frightening. Then you destroy them before they can leave. That's not what I'm doing. It is exactly what you're doing. Emily removed the building key from her ring and placed it on the file. I resign. His face hardened automatically. You're emotional. No. I'm finally being rational. You cannot walk out tonight. If someone framed you, you're in danger. If someone framed me, the danger is already inside this building. She went to the bedroom and returned with a small suitcase she kept packed from years of temporary work. Alessandro blocked the door. Move. No. You do not get to accuse me of betraying you, and then decide I need your protection. I didn't accuse you. I asked questions. You asked whether loving you was part of a conspiracy. He flinched. Emily's voice softened, which somehow made it worse. I hope your empire is worth what you just lost. Alessandro moved aside. She walked past him without looking back. He stood in the doorway until the elevator carried her away. Then he looked down at the key on the counter and understood that the quietest person in his life had left behind the loudest silence he had ever heard. For 3 weeks, Emily disappeared from Alessandro's world. She rented a studio in Queens, accepted a position at a small forensic accounting firm, and refused every call from Romano Holdings. Alessandro sent messages, flowers, a handwritten apology, and finally nothing at all. The silence should have relieved her. Instead, it frightened her. Because while she was gone, the pattern she had been tracking continued to move. Old employee badges were reactivated. Money shifted between companies without board approval. Government subpoenas arrived at 3 Romano businesses on the same morning. 2 long-standing allies canceled contracts within hours of each other. Then the news broke. Federal agents raided a Romano warehouse in Newark. Investigators froze construction accounts. Television reporters surrounded the Manhattan headquarters and announced that the Romano Empire was collapsing under evidence of fraud, racketeering, and public corruption. Emily watched from the break room of her new office. The evidence shown on the screen was too neat. Real financial crimes were messy. These records were arranged like a presentation. Every accusation pointed toward Alessandro, and every supporting document had passed through Human Resources or the Advisory Council. Gerald had not merely framed Emily. He had removed her because she was the only person likely to see the larger operation. Emily returned to her desk, opened the encrypted backup she had created after the break-in, and worked through the night. By morning she had the answer. Gerald had supplied the government with altered personnel records and fabricated payment trails. Vincent DeLuca had coordinated the council, used shell companies to move money, and positioned himself to seize control after Alessandro's arrest. The account opened in Emily's name had been created by a bank officer whose daughter worked for one of Vincent's companies. The final proof was hidden in elevator records. On the night Gerald claimed Emily had opened the account remotely, his badge had entered Vincent's private office at 1:13 a.m. He had remained there for 48 minutes. The next morning, the forged transfer was initiated from Vincent's secure network. Emily printed everything. At 8 o'clock on Tuesday morning, she walked back into the Romano building wearing the same lavender cardigan she had worn on her first day. Reporters crowded the lobby. Employees stood in frightened groups. Security guards who once mocked her stepped aside without being asked. Alessandro was alone in his office. He looked as if he had not slept since she left. His shirt was open at the collar, his face unshaven, and the once perfect desk had returned to chaos. When Emily entered, he stood so quickly his chair fell backward. "Emily, don't speak yet." He obeyed. She placed a black folder in front of him. "The account was opened using a copy of my identification from my personnel file." Gerald accessed that file 6 times. Vincent's bank officer approved the account. The emails were created on the council's private server. The federal evidence was altered before it was submitted. Alessandro opened the folder with shaking hands. "Gerald and Vincent?" "Yes. Marco was part of their plan before Moretti recruited him. They expected Moretti to kill you. When that failed, they used the council and the government." He read in silence. Every page tightened his expression. Finally he whispered, "You came back." "I came back because thousands of innocent employees will lose their jobs if your legitimate companies collapse." His eyes lifted to hers. "And because," she added, "despite everything, I still couldn't let them destroy you with my name attached to the lie. I don't deserve that." "No, you don't." The honesty struck him harder than cruelty would have. Alessandro walked around the desk but stopped several feet away. "I was wrong," he said. "Not confused. Not pressured. Wrong. I let people who feared you turn my fear against you. I asked you to prove your love when I had already failed to prove mine." Emily said nothing. "I cannot undo what I said," he continued. "But I will spend the rest of my life regretting it, whether you forgive me or not." Her eyes burned. "First save your company," she said. "Then decide what kind of man you want to be when the crisis is over." They worked for 36 hours. Emily coordinated the attorneys, traced the forged transfers, and delivered the original records to investigators. Alessandro removed Vincent and the compromised council members from every company board. Security detained Gerald as he attempted to leave the country through a private terminal. When confronted with the evidence, Gerald blamed everyone except himself. "She walked in here and took everything," he shouted. "The position, the influence, your trust." Emily looked at him calmly. "I didn't take your place, Gerald. You never earned the place you imagined was yours." By Friday, the government suspended the raids and opened an investigation into the fabricated evidence. The legitimate accounts were released. Business partners returned. Vincent's conspiracy collapsed under its own records. Alessandro's empire survived, but it did not return to what it had been. He dissolved the old advisory council. He separated the legitimate companies from the criminal operations and began dismantling the businesses that depended on violence. He appointed independent directors, strengthened compliance, and gave Emily full authority over financial oversight. She accepted the position on one condition: no secrets that can destroy thousands of employees. "Agreed. No threats when I disagree with you." "Agreed. And I do not belong to you." Alessandro held her gaze. "No. You choose me or you don't." For months she chose only the work. He did not pressure her. He apologized without demanding an answer. He knocked before entering. He rebuilt trust through ordinary things. Honest reports, kept promises, and difficult conversations he once would have avoided. One evening, nearly a year after her first day, Emily found him waiting outside her office with 2 paper containers. "What is that?" she asked. "Boxed pasta." "From where?" "I made it." She stared at him. "Should I call security?" "Probably." They ate at her desk. Afterward, Alessandro took a small velvet box from his pocket. Emily immediately raised a hand. "Do not kneel. Half the building is watching through the glass." He glanced toward the hallway. Several employees looked away too late. Alessandro remained standing. "The first day you came here, everyone thought you were the weakest person in the building," he said. "You were the strongest. You saved my life, my company, and eventually the part of me I had buried beneath fear. I cannot promise I will never make another mistake. I can promise I will never again make you pay for someone else's betrayal." He opened the box. "Emily Carter, will you marry me?" She looked at the man everyone feared. Then at the employees pretending not to listen. "One condition," she said. His mouth curved. "Of course. I control the calendar." The entire floor erupted in laughter. Alessandro smiled. "Always." "Yes." Their wedding was small, private, and protected from cameras. Emily wore a simple ivory dress. Alessandro cried before she reached the end of the aisle and denied it afterward. 10 years later, Emily Carter Romano stood in the same 43rd floor office overlooking Manhattan. Romano Holdings had become a fully legitimate international company. Alessandro served as chairman. Emily ran daily operations as chief executive, feared by dishonest executives and loved by employees who knew she remembered their names. Her lavender cardigan was framed behind her desk. Not because it was beautiful, because it reminded her of the morning everyone laughed when she stepped off the elevator. A new assistant entered carrying a stack of reports. "Mrs. Romano, the board is waiting." Emily closed the file in front of her. "Tell them I'll be there in 2 minutes." The assistant hesitated. "They said it was urgent." Emily smiled. Everything is urgent when people fail to prepare. As the young woman left, Alessandro appeared in the doorway. "You terrified the board again," he said. "They'll recover." He crossed the office and kissed her forehead. "Do you ever think about your first day?" Emily looked at the cardigan, the skyline, and the empire built from all the things others had failed to see. "Sometimes. They thought you wouldn't last 10 minutes. They were wrong. They usually were." Emily took his hand and walked toward the boardroom. She was no longer invisible. But the truth was she had never been powerless. The world had simply mistaken quietness for weakness, kindness for surrender, and an ordinary appearance for an ordinary mind. Emily Carter had noticed what everyone else ignored. And in the end, the woman no one believed could survive a day became the only person capable of saving the empire. And the man everyone else feared.